Chapter 1. During the lunch break, I sauntered out of Harrison Miller's office, heels clicking, hips swaying with an air of springtime freshness. All eyes in the vicinity immediately fixed on me. Some gazes were disdainful, others scornful. But what did any of that have to do with me? I still did the least amount of work, yet earned the highest salary. Every single person in this company, without exception, had to politely address me as Miss Archer. As for what they thought of me, how they saw me, or what they whispered about me behind my back, none of it affected me. What I truly wanted, they wouldn't know. At least, not yet. After all, in their eyes, I was just a floozy who had slept her way to the top, latching onto an old man 25 years my senior to achieve my current position. They believed I was after Harrison Miller's money. Only I knew that what I truly wanted was his life. Once, I too was a young girl with a ponytail and an innocent face. It was precisely my naivety that Harrison Miller had preyed upon, disregarding the watchful eyes of the entire company, determined to take advantage of me in his office. And so, carrying my secret, everything fell into place. On the surface, I became the woman ambiguously entangled with Harrison Miller. But beneath that facade, I was a wolf, lying in wait, biding my time. He coveted my youth and vitality. I meticulously collected evidence that could deliver a fatal blow to him at any moment. But I was no mistress, no home wrecker. Because Harrison Miller's first wife was long dead. According to office gossip, his wife had died of a broken heart, driven to her grave by his incessant philandering. And because of this, his only son, Ethan Miller, had an extremely strained relationship with him. He hadn't been home in years. Chapter 2. What role did I play in Harrison Miller's life? A beautiful, understanding confidant, never making excessive demands. I appeared when he needed me and vanished when he didn't. It was precisely because of this that I had managed to stay by his side for so many years, still favored. Harrison Miller asked me if I wanted to be Mrs. Miller. I lowered my head, smiled faintly, and shook my head. Mr. Miller, you must be joking. The line of women wanting to be Mrs. Miller would probably stretch for miles. I'm just a young woman. How could I possibly be so fortunate? I knew what to say to please him. Sure enough, Harrison Miller roared with laughter, pulled me into his embrace, and kissed me hard. That's why I say you're smart. You never reach for things beyond your grasp. Come to my place tonight? He never minced words, and this time was no different, even speaking so directly in front of me without any pretense. It was the first time he had invited me to his home. A thrill shot through me. I felt I was one step closer to my plan succeeding. But I kept my expression neutral, merely nodding tactfully. When work ended, I brazenly looped my arm through Harrison Miller's as we walked from his office to the parking lot. Naturally, I was the center of attention all the way. Harrison Miller enjoyed it. It accentuated his charm, and I was, of course, willing to play along. In the car, Harrison Miller's hands began to wander. With my deliberate cooperation, his excitement grew, and we kissed passionately from the villa's entrance all the way to the living room. He pushed me down onto the living room sofa, his hands all over me. Could you show a little decorum? A cold voice interjected. Flustered, I pushed Harrison Miller away and straightened my disheveled clothes. A man in a gray sweatsuit, his face clouded with a gloomy expression, stood at the top of the second-floor staircase, looking down at us coldly. What are you doing back? Harrison Miller, annoyed at the interruption, snapped. This is my son, he explained to me, then headed to the restroom. I sat on the sofa, my back ramrod straight. Ethan Miller's gaze was piercing, scrutinizing me from head to toe before he let out a sneer. Even under the stares of my colleagues, I'd never felt so flustered. But for some reason, in front of him, I felt completely exposed, with nowhere to hide. Hello, my name is... I don't care what your name is, but to be the first woman Harrison Miller has brought home, your methods are quite something. He cut me off and slammed his bedroom door shut with a bang. It seemed the rumors about their father-son relationship were true. It was incredibly stiff, to the point where Ethan called his father by his full name. This unexpected arrival threw a wrench in the works, and I felt terribly awkward caught in the middle. When Harrison Miller emerged from the restroom, I made my excuses, ready to leave. Harrison Miller wouldn't let me go. He pulled me down to sit beside him and earnestly told me about his relationship with his son. Indeed, it was because of the death of Ethan Miller's mother, Eleanor, that that their father-son bond had frozen over. He hadn't expected Ethan, who had been away from home for years, to suddenly return. I nodded, feigning indifference, but my gaze couldn't help drifting towards Ethan Miller's closed door. The part-time cleaner finished preparing dinner and left. At the long dining table, Ethan Miller sat opposite me. He had an air of untamed recklessness. The Western cutlery in his hands lacked any elegance. Instead, the knife scraped harshly against the plate, producing a grating sound. Harrison Miller frowned, scolding him for his lack of manners. Ethan Miller paid him no mind, stuffing a large piece of steak into his mouth and mumbling indistinctly, "Compared to you, I'm truly leagues behind." Then, his sharp gaze landed on me. His stare made my skin crawl, and I felt incredibly uncomfortable. Even though I had been meticulously plotting against Harrison Miller for years, right now, all I wanted was to escape this battlefield of father and son. After dinner, Harrison Miller called Ethan Miller into the study. Soon after, the sound of arguing drifted out. I heard Harrison Miller's furious voice. "How dare you speak to your Auntie V like that, Auntie V? Oh, he was talking about me." I smiled faintly, looking out the window. The streetlights were beginning to glow, casting a warm, yellow light, but I detested such warm tones. The father-son conversation ended on a sour note. Ethan Miller slung his jacket over one shoulder. Seeing I hadn't left yet, he paused. "I didn't realize your tastes were so peculiar, Auntie V." With that, he sneered and left. Perhaps rich kids were just different. Though he was 5 years younger than me, his aura was terrifyingly domineering. After the argument, Harrison Miller was no longer in the mood to spend the night with me. I returned to the apartment he had bought for me. Chapter 3. For the next few days, Harrison Miller seemed to have something heavy on his mind. He was gloomy all day, casting a pall over the entire office. My colleagues urged me to ask him what was wrong, as if in their eyes I was practically Mrs. Miller already. Pushed by the others, I found myself at his office door. As soon as I entered, I saw Harrison Miller and Ethan Miller in a standoff, neither willing to back down. Mr. Miller, it's time for the meeting?" "Got it, you can go." Harrison Miller's voice was heavy as he frustratedly ran a hand through his hair. I didn't dare look around, keeping my head down as I exited. Before the door closed completely, I heard Ethan Miller say, "Fine, I'll work at the company, but she will be my secretary." My head snapped up instinctively, and my eyes met his. A shiver ran down my spine. I quickly closed the door. Ethan Miller's eyes were as if they could see through everything. My secrets felt exposed, with nowhere to hide. At the meeting, Harrison Miller announced a new personnel appointment. Ethan Miller would be joining us as general manager. And I, formerly the special assistant to the president, was demoted to secretary to the general manager. I stood up, wanting to make one last effort, but under Ethan Miller's gaze, the words on my lips changed to, "I'll cooperate fully with Mr. Ethan." Moving out of Harrison Miller's office, I could only cast a resentful glance at his position. Damn it. Leaving here would make it even harder to find evidence against him. I could only take it one step at a time. The immediate priority was to placate these two and prevent any further complications. Ethan Miller was not easy to get along with. Just a cup of coffee had me running back and forth 5 or 6 times. He deliberately called me Auntie V over and over. Even with my thick skin, I couldn't stand it. "Mr. Ethan, you can just call me by my name. I'm Vivian Archer." He glanced at me and said, "Wouldn't dare." Then, he poured the coffee I had made for the 6th time into the potted plant on the windowsill. The same fate as the other 5 cups. I lowered my head, seething inwardly but daring not to speak out. Fortunately, he didn't continue to make things difficult for me, which was a relief. Since Ethan Miller joined the company, Harrison Miller had been remarkably well behaved. As Ethan Miller's secretary, I was constantly at his beck and call. If he wasn't summoning me, seeing Harrison Miller was harder than climbing to the heavens. While going downstairs to retrieve some files, I ran into Harrison's new assistant. His eyes lit up when he saw me. He thrust the files into my arms, muttered a quick instruction, and hurried off to the restroom. I smoothed my hair, put on my most appropriate smile, and knocked on Harrison Miller's office door. I placed the files on his desk, then naturally circled around to the back of his desk and sat on his lap. Without a word, I looked at Harrison Miller with eyes full of reproach. Harrison Miller's hands roamed my waist. Some things didn't need to be said. A few gestures conveyed an unspoken understanding. Just as the office was about to heat up, the door was suddenly thrown open. Ethan Miller stood at the entrance, his face like a block of ice. "Miss Archer, slacking off on the job, are we?" I was still sitting stunned on Harrison Miller's lap. The next second, Ethan Miller had pulled me aside. Harrison Miller's face was thunderously dark. I could feel him suppressing his anger. Still, he said nothing, merely patted my hand and told me to leave with Ethan Miller. Ethan Miller didn't say a word, just gripped my arm, pulling me along. Needless to say, I was once again the center of office gossip. I was used to it by now, but this time, for some reason, I felt an inexplicable sense of shame. As we were about to reach Ethan Miller's office, I heard a colleague's voice, not particularly hushed. "What's with this Vivian Archer? Playing both Mr. Miller SR and JR. So skillfully?" Similar catty remarks were cut off by the closing door. Ethan Miller, exuding an icy aura, spun around, trapping me between the door and his chest. I was still dazed when he gripped my chin, forcing me to meet his gaze. His eyes, chillingly calm, made me extremely uncomfortable. I reached out to break free from his grasp, but he pinned my other hand firmly. "Vivian Archer, you're really something." I pretended not to understand his meaning, avoiding his penetrating gaze. His cold laugh echoed in my ear. "You like Harrison Miller that much?" "Like him? More like I'd like him dead." But I couldn't say any of this to Ethan Miller. A blush crept onto my face. I lowered my head, like a young girl whose secret crush had been exposed. I said nothing, yet I had said everything. Ethan Miller gritted his teeth in anger, his jaw muscles bulging. His grip on me tightened. I gritted my teeth, determined not to make a sound, my lips stubbornly pressed together. "Vivian Archer, you will regret your choice." His voice was like a biting December wind, chilling me to the bone as it hit my ears. "Mr. Ethan, I'm an adult. I will naturally take responsibility for my own actions." To maintain my clinging vine persona, I presented myself as someone willing to sacrifice everything for Harrison Miller, closing my eyes and letting him imagine whatever he pleased. "Good, very good." After he spoke, I felt his breath getting closer, and then a pair of hands on my waist. When I opened my eyes again, I saw his face incredibly close to mine. "Ethan Miller!" Bang, the office door was suddenly pushed open. I turned my head and saw a furious Harrison Miller. Chapter 4. "Ethan Miller, are you bullying Vivian again?" Thankfully, I had pushed him away just in time. When Harrison Miller entered, he only saw Ethan Miller standing 2 meters away from me, having been pushed back. I kept my head down, stammering, while inconspicuously turning my face so Harrison Miller could see my cheek. Considering the force of Ethan Miller's grip earlier, it must have left a mark. If I could make Harrison Miller feel sorry for me and transfer me back to his side, that would be best. Unfortunately, Harrison Miller's old eyes were failing him. He didn't notice the red mark on my face at all, solely focused on glaring at Ethan Miller. "Me bully her? She's your woman. How would I dare touch her?" Ethan Miller tugged at his sleeve, a sarcastic smile playing on his lips. Ethan Miller's attitude made Harrison Miller feel dizzy. He grabbed the doorknob to steady himself. You ungrateful whelp." I quickly supported Harrison Miller's arm, helping him calm down. Once he had recovered somewhat, he patted my hand and told me to leave first. I couldn't wait. I practically fled Ethan Miller's office. As I turned, I clearly saw the daggers in Ethan Miller's eyes. In my years by Harrison Miller's side, I had long since mastered the art of remaining unfazed by favor or disgrace. Perhaps Ethan Miller's unexpected appearance had been too sudden, leaving me unprepared. Although I had fled in panic initially, I quickly calmed down. If I truly were only after Harrison Miller's money, Ethan Miller's proposition would have been perfect. Unfortunately for him, he had misjudged me. Night fell. I sat on the rocking chair on the balcony, the red wine in my hand glowing an enticing dark red in the dim light. I drained the glass. I was perfectly lucid. Ethan Miller hadn't said those things because he liked me. Based on my recent understanding of him, it boiled down to 2 reasons. 1, because I was his father's woman. Given the strained relationship between father and son, it wasn't impossible that he was using me to spite his father. And 2, blood is thicker than water. Even if they fought like cats and dogs, I would always be an outsider, a predator watching from the sidelines. He had certainly gone to great lengths to make Harrison Miller see my true colors. He was even willing to offer himself up. Since he had walked right into it, wouldn't I be doing him a disservice by not accepting the challenge? Having figured these things out, my wariness towards the suddenly appeared Ethan Miller vanished. Instead, a thrill of challenge rose within me. The next day, I went to work as usual. When facing Ethan Miller, I always unintentionally avoided his gaze. This caused his eyes to linger on me more and more. Different tactics for different people. With Harrison Miller, I could be passionately fiery. But with a dangerous individual like Ethan Miller, caution was still necessary. Every move I made was telling Ethan Miller that I had taken his words from the other day to heart, but that I was still waiting for the right opportunity. Harrison Miller was preparing for a business trip and wanted to take me along. The implication was clear to everyone, though unspoken. I feigned reluctance, playing the innocent coquette, and told him that Ethan Miller wouldn't let me go, that he seemed to dislike me very much. After speaking, I stared at Harrison Miller with a wounded expression. That one look was enough to ignite Harrison Miller's machismo. He informed Ethan Miller in an extremely forceful manner, leaving no room for negotiation. After Harrison left, I stood in Ethan Miller's office with my head down, staring at the pattern on the floor, mentally calculating when Ethan would erupt. It happened faster than I expected. He slammed his fist into the wall next to me. I looked at him in alarm, my lips trembling, a tear I'd been holding back for a long time welling up in my eye. Ethan Miller's imposing aura immediately weakened. You want to be with him that badly? No, it's not that, Mr. Miller is the boss, after all. I quickly refuted, then covered my mouth as if I had said something I shouldn't have. The scene was so similar to the day he had cornered me against the wall. Yet, it evoked a different feeling in him this time. He was very pleased with my reaction. He chuckled softly, then cupped my face in his hands. Affection flowed from his gaze, and I cooperated by blushing. Ethan Miller was 7 years younger than me, but in his presence, I behaved in a way that completely belied my age. Like a helpless young girl who needed him to rescue her from dire straits. All right, leave it to me. With those words, Ethan Miller rushed off to busy himself with something. In any case, it wasn't long before Harrison Miller announced that his new assistant would be accompanying him on the business trip instead. The look of unwillingness in Harrison's eyes made me suspect Ethan Miller had something to do with it. I couldn't help but gain a new appreciation for Ethan Miller's methods. I wondered if teaming up with him was the right choice. Once Harrison Miller left, Ethan Miller became even more audacious with me, but he was different from his father. He was genuinely like a young man experiencing his first crush. Even secretly brushing his hand against mine would make him give a small, suppressed smile to himself for a long time. Harrison Miller's business trip was for a week. It felt long, yet short. I had to speed up my plans. Fate was on my side. On the third day of Harrison Miller's absence, Ethan Miller came down with a severe flu, lying at home, weakly calling me. When I arrived at his place, I saw him flushed red with fever. After chiding him a little for not taking care of himself, I went to the kitchen to make him some soup and prepare his medicine with hot water. At first, he kept clinging to me from behind, nuzzling my waist. After I dodged him a few times, he looked at me with the eyes of an abandoned puppy. He was a completely different person from when we first met. I endured the discomfort, evading his wandering hands, not forgetting to shoot him a few coquettish glares. That was enough. After taking his medicine, drowsiness overcame him. I urged him back to his room. Only after he was sound asleep did he finally release the hand that had been clutching my sleeve. I dropped my pretense, my expression turning cold. I scanned the villa, my gaze finally settling on Harrison Miller's study. Turning off the gas in the kitchen, I walked towards the study. Chapter 5. As I expected, Harrison Miller's study was locked, but I had come prepared. I used the spare key to open the study. It was slightly messy inside. Because Harrison Miller didn't allow the cleaner into his study, there had to be something very important in here. I gently closed the door, then turned on the computer and took out a USB drive. I had rehearsed these actions countless times in my mind, but I was still nervous. It took several tries to insert the USB drive successfully. His computer contained numerous files, all disorganized. I searched through folder after folder. Finally, in a very well-hidden folder, I found what I was looking for. I clenched my fists, trying to suppress the frantic beating of my heart. Years of enduring humiliation, and now, I was finally about to see the light. The data transfer was excruciatingly slow. My heart was pounding violently. "Vive, where are you?" Ethan Miller's voice called out. My actions were quicker than my thoughts. I hastily pulled out the USB drive, glanced resentfully at the computer, and reluctantly shut it down. So close, returning to Ethan Miller's room, he weakly propped himself up with his hands, leaning against the headboard. He asked where I had been. I told him I was watching the soup in the kitchen and hadn't dared to leave. A smile flickered across Ethan Miller's face as he took my hand, kneading it gently. My emotions were a complex mix: anxiety, regret. Just another 10 minutes and I would have had it. Yet all my efforts had been in vain. "From now on, just be with me," Ethan Miller said. I glanced out the window. The orange sun was slowly setting. I merely said it was getting late, grabbed my handbag, and left. It wasn't that I didn't want to stay, to find another chance in the middle of the night to continue searching for what I needed. Rather, Ethan Miller's attitude made me uneasy. He knew I was his father's mistress, yet he maintained such an ambiguous relationship with me. I felt like I was recklessly testing the limits on a cliff's edge. But I hadn't forgotten my true purpose. Men would only be stumbling blocks on my path to success. Even if he was Ethan Miller, it was all the same. Wasn't he an only son? Then I'll let you taste the bitterness of being utterly alone, betrayed by everyone. Chapter 6, it was true, I was Harrison Miller's mistress. But behind this identity, I had another one he knew nothing about. 10 years ago, I was just a young girl fresh out of high school. I had hoped to get into a good university through the college entrance exams, so our family could turn things around and no longer live in hardship. But all those fantasies came to an abrupt end on the morning of my exams. Harrison Miller arrived at our house with a crew of workers. Because the demolition compensation offered had never been reasonable, my parents hadn't signed the agreement. That was the first time I saw him. Thinking back now, it only fills me with terror. With a sinister smile on his face, he gave a casual wave of his hand, and our home was forcibly demolished. My father, David Archer, was in the kitchen cooking at the time. He had no time to react and was buried beneath the rubble. He died on the spot. My mother, Sarah Archer, also died in a suspicious car accident while seeking justice for my father, leaving me all alone. I wanted to carry on my mother's last wish, but I was powerless. I sought help from many people, but I was always turned away. Finally, a kind soul told me that the person we had crossed was Harrison Miller, a powerful magnate in the city. From then on, that name became my nightmare. Countless times I would wake up in the middle of the night, his image the main character in my cold sweats. I knelt before my parents' graves for 2 whole days. As dawn broke, I watched the sun rise in the east and made a solemn vow. So, I began to research Harrison Miller online. I saw a job posting on his company's official website and went to the black market to buy a fake diploma. With that fake diploma, I successfully got into Harrison Miller's company. I used my innocent appearance to seduce him, becoming his special assistant Archer. For years, I secretly collected evidence while by his side. The tax evasion alone was enough to land him in serious trouble, but it wasn't enough. I wanted him to pay with his life. Unfortunately, I had never found the evidence of him bribing officials during the demolition of my home. That was why I had targeted his study. The incomplete files on the USB drive frustrated me. I poured myself a glass of red wine and drank alone on the balcony, mulling over my next move. I already knew where the evidence was. Now, the main task was to drive a wedge between father and son. The next day at work, I brought Ethan Miller some healthy soup I'd gotten takeout from a restaurant, implying that I had cooked it myself. Ethan Miller's expression was unreadable, but in the end, he accepted it with a smile. Chapter 7, my plan proceeded very smoothly. Under my approach of being close yet distant, Ethan Miller seemed to have fallen into my trap. I timed it perfectly. On the day Harrison Miller was due back, I declined Ethan's invitation for dinner. Lowering my head, I told him with a troubled expression that Harrison Miller was returning. He looked at me, biting my lip, silent for a long time. "I just want one word from you." "What? Me or him?" Was it finally time to get to the point? I'd been coy for long enough, it was time to stop. I gathered my thoughts and told him my true feelings. Mr. Ethan, I don't have any connections. It was Mr. Miller who gave me the life I have today. I don't want to cause trouble between you and your father because of me. Halfway through my sentence, Ethan Miller cut me off. Then he handed me a key. He told me to go to his place and wait for him, that he would handle everything. Arriving at Harrison Miller's house, I immediately rushed to his study. I turned on the computer, found the folder from last time, and inside it was empty. I frantically tried to recall my previous steps, wondering if I had made a mistake and accidentally deleted the files. But neither the recycle bin nor any other folder contained what I was looking for. In that instant, my hair stood on end and a cold sweat broke out. There was only one possibility: I had been discovered. Turning off the computer, I didn't know whether I should confront Ethan Miller, the only person who could possibly know about my actions. What would I say? I'm trying to destroy your father, give me back the files? The thought itself seemed utterly ridiculous. About an hour later, Ethan Miller appeared with a thick stack of documents. Whatever you want, I can give it to you. Those documents were the evidence I had only partially copied last time I looked at Ethan Miller, his face earnest, and stammered for a long moment before managing to utter a sentence. When did you know? He helped me organize the documents while explaining. From the first time we met, I knew you were the child of that family Harrison Miller once wronged. Back then, he was only 10. He actually remembered me. I touched my face, which had long lost its youthful innocence, finding it hard to believe his words. I looked completely different now compared to 10 years ago, and I clearly remembered he wasn't at the scene back then. Ethan Miller told me he had accidentally seen a video Harrison Miller had filmed. Although my appearance had changed, my eyes couldn't lie. He also said that when he saw that video, he knew Harrison Miller was an out-and-out devil. Even though Harrison was older now, his methods less ruthless, his fundamental nature wouldn't change. A leopard can't change its spots. If Harrison knew I had been lurking by his side all these years just for revenge, I would die a horrible death. I will help you. Only I can help you truly get your revenge. I didn't understand. They were father and son. They should have been on the same side. No matter how bad their relationship was, they wouldn't truly break apart. For Ethan Miller to tell me all this now was highly inappropriate. Why help me? I voiced my doubt, staring at him intently, afraid to miss even a flicker of his expression. Ethan Miller sat down next to me, covered his face with his hands, and told me a story. A story about him and Harrison Miller. Chapter 8, Eleanor Miller and Harrison Miller had an arranged marriage for business purposes. There was little affection between them. But for years, Eleanor had dutifully fulfilled her role as Mrs. Miller, managing the household affairs impeccably. Harrison Miller, however, was a restless man. He kept his wife at home while having countless affairs on the side. When Eleanor was pregnant with Ethan, Harrison's mistress came to their home to cause trouble, nearly causing Eleanor to miscarry. Ethan was born safely, but Eleanor succumbed to postpartum depression. The exhaustion of raising a child alone, coupled with her husband's indifference and the constant harassment from his mistresses, completely broke the woman who had devoted herself to her family. She committed suicide on New Year's Eve when Ethan was 5 years old. Eleanor had essentially raised Ethan single-handedly, persevering for 5 years. But on that desolate New Year's Eve, she chose to leave. Her maternal grandparents were devastated by her death. The elderly couple were both hospitalized and passed away soon after, one after the other. Harrison Miller then conveniently took over her family's company. Ethan was old enough to remember things by then, so he harbored a deep resentment towards the father who was rarely around. Even though Harrison tried his best to fulfill his fatherly duties after Eleanor's death, the seeds of hatred had already taken deep root in Ethan's heart. From a very young age, he had longed for the day he could make this man kneel before his mother's grave and repent. This story was truly heartbreaking. As a woman, I didn't know whether to pity Eleanor or blame her for her own weakness. By the end of his story, tears were streaming down Ethan Miller's face. A grown man, his eyes were bloodshot, even the tip of his nose was red. I took his hand, offering him what little strength I could. You should know what Harrison Miller will face if these are handed over to the police. I wanted to know just how deep Ethan Miller's hatred ran. Ha! Ethan Miller let out a cold laugh, wiped the tears from his eyes, and his face returned to its icy mask. Of course, otherwise I wouldn't have given these to you. Actually, on the day he was sick, he had already noticed my actions. After all, I had claimed to be watching the soup in the kitchen, but when he came downstairs, the soup was already cold. Such a slip-up, I smiled faintly. Thankfully, Ethan Miller was on my side. Otherwise, my path to revenge might have ended right there. So, for our next act, should we stage a complete breakdown of father-son relations? I proposed my idea, sharing my plan truthfully as an exchange for him handing over the evidence. Ethan Miller wasn't keen on me having too large a role in this drama. In his words, Harrison Miller had already wronged me enough. Now that Harrison was at the end of his rope, there was no need for me to get dragged through the mud. I, however, disagreed. As Harrison Miller's possession, wouldn't it be more dramatic if his only son snatched me away and it became public knowledge? Ethan Miller couldn't win against me and reluctantly agreed to my idea. We discussed it for a long time. It wasn't until night fell that I returned to my apartment, filled with excitement, awaiting the next day's show. Chapter 9. The first thing Harrison Miller did upon his return was summon me to his office. I went, but I wasn't alone. Many people in the company saw Ethan Miller and me walking hand in hand to Harrison Miller's office. We exchanged a satisfied glance before knocking on Harrison Miller's office door. As soon as we entered, Harrison Miller's gaze fell on our clasped hands. He looked like he'd swallowed something foul. Ethan Miller, Harrison Miller slammed his hand on the desk, shouting Ethan's full name. Ethan Miller, with a nonchalant, devil-may-care attitude, just grunted dismissively in acknowledgement. According to the script, I just needed to be a background prop, letting the company staff's imaginations run wild. Harrison Miller clutched his chest with one hand, pointing at Ethan with the other, cursing him for being shameless, for even coveting his own father's woman. Your woman, she could be your daughter. At your age, have some decency. At Ethan Miller's words, Harrison Miller's face turned ashen. He then turned to look at me, but Ethan Miller blocked his line of sight the next second. If you have something to say it to me. Harassing a woman, Harrison Miller, you haven't matured at all over these years. When we entered, we had deliberately left the door slightly ajar, and I had also surreptitiously opened the Venetian blinds, making it easier for outsiders to watch the drama unfold. In his fury, Harrison Miller couldn't possibly notice these details. He grabbed the ashtray from his desk and hurled it. Ethan Miller easily dodged it. Father and son, one blazing with fury, the other sarcastically taunting. The atmosphere instantly reached a climax. Seeing that a good crowd had gathered, I managed to squeeze out a few tears and grabbed Ethan Miller's hand. Mr. Miller, if you want to blame someone, blame me. But Mr. Ethan and I are truly in love. If it weren't for you back then, I wouldn't have. Crash in a fit of rage, Harrison Miller slammed the telephone on his desk to the floor. The flying receiver nearly hit me, but Ethan Miller reacted quickly, shielding me. Are you okay? He asked with concern, his hands on my shoulders, checking me up and down. I shook my head, pushed him away, and walked up to Harrison Miller. The hatred in my eyes was undisguised, but to those who couldn't see my expression, my voice sounded incredibly aggrieved. Mr. Miller, it was you who made my life miserable. I've figured it out now. I want to leave. Is that wrong? Harrison Miller's face turned a ghastly pale, he nearly lost his footing, and his breathing became heavy. Good you two are something else. After roaring, he suddenly pitched forward and collapsed. The onlookers outside finally snapped out of their shock and started calling for an ambulance. Ethan Miller and I exchanged a look, a smirk playing on our lips. Overcome with rage, Harrison Miller's blood pressure skyrocketed and he was hospitalized. As his only son, Ethan Miller temporarily took over the company. And I, with the evidence in hand, walked into the police station. When I came out, the sunlight felt particularly dazzling. I shielded my eyes from the harsh sun and looked into the distance. Only at this moment did I feel like a real, living person. Chapter 10. 3 months later, Harrison Miller was found guilty of multiple offenses, including bribery, tax evasion, and intentional homicide. He was sentenced to death. On the day of the sentencing, I went to see Harrison Miller. When I recounted the past events to him, his eyes filled with terror, and he muttered to himself, I knew it. Seeing him like this brought me immense satisfaction. I didn't forget to deliver a final blow. Actually, you might have gotten away scot-free. You have your good son to thank. It was Ethan Miller who personally handed the most crucial evidence to me. Harrison Miller, you've been a philanderer your whole life. You never imagined you'd die at the hands of your own son and a woman, did you? He fainted from anger again. But what did that have to do with me? My revenge was complete. I once again visited my parents' graves. I sat there for a long time until my legs were completely numb before preparing to leave. Mom, Dad, you can rest in peace now. Your enemy has been brought to justice. I'm going to start a new life. I gave a final, reluctant bow. As I turned, I saw Ethan Miller standing not far away, holding a bouquet of daisies. Although he had helped me get revenge, deep down, I wanted to keep a respectful distance from such a ruthless person. I gave a slight nod as a greeting, but he grabbed my arm. Vive, it's all over. I nodded. Of course it was over. My enemy was about to face capital punishment. This was fantastic news. Only I no longer had a home. This was a fact that even Harrison Miller, that villain, dying 1,000 deaths couldn't change. Later, I sold the apartment Harrison Miller had bought for me and bought a plane ticket back to my hometown. Just before boarding, Ethan Miller, who had been finding all sorts of excuses to appear before me, showed up again. He said he didn't want me to leave. Not leave. If I don't leave, where would I go? Continue to be your mistress. I sneered, avoiding his hurt gaze. He had told me many times that he liked me, that he didn't care about what happened with his father. But his affection came out of nowhere. When all was said and done, we were, in a way, each other's father's killer. If we got together, it would be too much of a soap opera. I looked at the man before me, who had just turned 21, dressed in a sharp suit, imposing and distinguished. He really wasn't much like his old man. I stepped forward, straightened his tie, and patted his shoulder. Go back, I'm going to start a new life, and so should you. He grabbed my hand, his eyes reddening again. I found it incredibly tedious, truly. I shook off his hand and told him clearly, Ethan Miller, by cooperating with you, I've achieved my goal. You've also avenged your maternal grandparents and your mother. From now on, we are people from two different worlds. We will never have any interaction again. If you try to use force to keep me by your side, I indeed have no way to stop you. But your father is a lesson for you. That's all I have to say. Take care. I turned and walked towards the boarding gate without a hint of lingering. Behind me, Ethan Miller shouted like a madman that he was willing no matter what. But I wasn't willing. From now on, I could have a brand new life. Why should I repeat past mistakes and bring ruin to a young man whose family was already shattered? Besides, judging by how he dealt with Harrison Miller, once he truly matured, he would probably be even more ruthless than his father. And I just wanted to live the rest of my life in peace. That was all.